and I'd like to bring in Sokwu, who will be giving us a bit of a welcome keynote talk around smart, secure cities and communities being revisited. So, Sokwu, welcome, and over to you.
All right, guys. It's me again. I guess I'm sharing my screen. And by the way, I don't want you guys to be bothered or bored by seeing me 10 more minutes, but I promise you that I'm going to go through important materials. So I'm going to talk about smart cities and IoT. That's what we call Internet of Things. And as I said, I work for NIST, which is part of the U.S. Department of Commerce. So I want to set the level first. So what is a smart city? I mean, we talk about it all the time, but what is a smart city and smart community? There are many definitions out there, but this is just an example. It's a working definition they were using in GCTC. Is cities and communities using smart technologies such as IoT and cyber physical systems to improve quality of life for their residents. So the important piece is use smart technologies to improve the quality of life, which is the goal. So after that, what does it look like? Okay, so now we have the definition. What does it exactly look like? So one easy way to explain that is to start with IoT ecosystem model. You have physical systems in IoT, and there are communication systems, and there are data analytics systems. And on top of it, there's a human and service where decisions are made. This is the ecosystem model that I use for Internet of Things system. If you superimpose this model onto a city or onto a municipality, that becomes a smart cities and smart communities. So now we know what it looks like. So where are they? There are hundreds and potentially thousands of smart city projects around the world. So it's almost impossible to count them all. So all we can do is to use some anecdotal survey or anecdotal method to see where they are. And this is just a partial list of the cities and communities around the world that have been participating in Global City Teams Challenge, NIST Global City Teams Challenge program between 2014 to 2019. And as you can see, there are larger cities like New York City and San Francisco and so on. But there are smaller cities like Newport News and Greenville, South Carolina, and Winooski, Vermont. And there are also not just the cities, but there are also rural areas that participate in these smart community challenges. And there are cities in Europe, and there are cities in Asia. There are cities in Africa. Virtually every region, everywhere in the world, have some kind of smart city projects. And over 500 companies and universities have teamed up with at least one of those 200 cities in Global City Teams Challenge to implement projects and share their findings and best practices. So now we know where they are. Now, let's talk about how it is deployed. So this is an important discussion because even if you know what it is, if you do not know how to deploy them, what are the challenges, it is not practical to start those projects. So in deployment model, the regions or countries have different perspectives and different approaches. In the US, a lot of these projects are very much a bottom up, meaning that cities and local governments, they take the lead, they define what they want, they find the resources, and they find the approaches to implement those projects. In Asia, it's very much a top-down process. Again, it's not easy to generalize all these cities, but this is just a trend. In many Asian countries, budget is set by the central government, and initiative is driven by the central government, and then cities follow the lead of the central governments in many cases. Europe is a mix of top-down and bottom-up, and there is a history of Europe starting from very much a top-down approach decades ago, and then they have added more of a bottom-up perspectives recently. Now, regardless what the model is, there are common issues for all these smart city projects. By nature, inherently, the smart city projects have to be done through public-private collaboration, government and private sector collaboration. And other issues and natural issues are, what are the funding models? What are the business models? How to make these projects sustainable? How to make these services sustainable? Now, what are the tangible benefits to residents? And you can talk about all this interesting technologies, but at the end of the day, when you meet a resident and they you ask them, what do you see? I mean, what do you feel? And do you see your life has changed based on these new solutions? That is an important question to ask. And what are the best practices and standards? And how do we keep, how do we collect best practices and replicate their success going forward? And what are the security and privacy concerns that we just talked about? And how to integrate this different infrastructure, transportation, public safety, and so on? And probably one of the most important question is, how do we avoid the fragmentation? Meaning that every city will do their own thing. That's natural. But you cannot grow the market. You cannot create the economies of scale if every city does their own custom solution. So how to create this, the economies of scale, that's really important issue too. So to address all these issues, NIST has started 2 smart city and community programs. One is, which you already talked about, Global City Teams Challenge. It is about a market. How do we create consensus? How to drive consensus in the market to avoid these fragmentation issues? How do we help the innovators and cities and communities get together and identify best practices and replicate those success instead of every city reinventing the wheel going over and over again? And second program that we do is Smart Cities and Communities Framework. This is about how to create consensus from technology perspective, and how do we collect these best practices and good solutions, successful solutions we identified through GCTC, and then aggregate and broadly share that so that cities do not have to go through all trial and errors. And these programs runs in hand. This is essentially creating what I call virtuous cycle, that GCTC identified best practice through real implementations, through collaboration between private and public sector, and SCCF program documented and pushed that back into GCTC to create more deployments. So this is sort of like what I just explained, deployment to framework and more deployment. That's how these 2 programs go create this cycle. It all starts with actual projects called action clusters, and we bring it up to super clusters, and then the SCCF goes back to replicate best practices. So past successes, this is my last slide. We have identified over 200 projects and cities, or worked with cities around the world of 500 companies. We have created 9 super clusters, and we had a lot of exposure, and we also identified 25 plus themes for SCCF. Now, key future goal, we want to accelerate the growth of the smart city innovation deployment cycle going forward. Thank you very much. And that was John's here to give the time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Sok-Woo, thank you very much. Just like with Scott, I'm feeling these are all appetizers, and I really want the main course with you guys. So